Okay, guys, I meant it about the little spoiler thing at the beginning. They've left kind of most of what this movie is and how the substance literally and figuratively works in it out of the trailers. They basically just kind of told you, hey, it's a gnarly, sexy, but also nasty body horror thing, so just go see it. It's very cool. You're not going to see anything else like it this year. Go see it, because otherwise I kind of have to talk about the plot here. Consider yourself warned. This is a Coralie Fargeat movie. I probably mispronounced that. Sorry. Mes excuses, mon français est mauvais. But yeah, you might remember her. She did that movie Revenge a few years ago, which was the rape revenge movie. A girl survives a sexual assault, then goes after the guys that did it, and you know, just kills the shit out of them, and that's the whole movie. That movie was great, hard to watch, looked fantastic, and this one is great, hard to watch, looks fantastic. Seems to be her brand so far. She's kind of got this thing going with the look, feel, and theme of these films so far. It almost, if I was being cheeky about it, kind of feels like if Michael Bay took a women's studies course and really, really listened. She makes movies that are filled with the nastiest violence, most explicit gore, most explicit nudity, really dials in on what, if it was coming from a filmmaker of a whole other bent, you would call, just by term of art, the male gaze cinematography, quote unquote. Really provocative angles, if you take my meaning, in exactly the way that they would be in, say, softcore pornography, car commercials, really high contrast, heavy saturation. Everything looks like LA on a much too clear day, even in the film before this, which was not set in LA, whereas this one is. And it's a really specific look that gets across a really specific sense of, if you didn't know that this was satirizing and commenting on what it was depicting, you still might suspect it, because otherwise, why would it be so in your face? Where it's uncomfortable, but you can't look away, even when it stops being dirty and starts getting just nasty and like, ugh, wow, okay, that is some grotesque stuff. Deliberately old school 80s style sex and violence, and then deliberately old school 80s style blood, guts, and gore. And it rules in that regard, even as it's also telling you stuff. But it's also different from a lot of the so-called elevated horror material, where you almost keep waiting for, like, the quote-unquote deconstruction to start, where it pulls back and says, no, this seems like it's making the most obvious point possible about beauty standards and actors and actresses and the way film industry, beauty industry, entertainment industry treats older women versus younger women, because it can't possibly just be saying this most obvious, constantly made historic point. But no, it's saying exactly that, just in the most gross, in your face. If you haven't gotten it by now, maybe having it shoved this far up front will do it way, and that's it. It's almost reconstructive versus deconstructive, pulling all the way back to just the most basic elements of the film industry will make you hate yourself for aging to the point of literal, figurative self-destruction, and this is the furthest extreme we can think of to show you to make that point. Plot-wise, such as it is, it's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story, but about anti-aging stuff. Demi Moore is playing a fairly fearless self-caricature as an actress of a certain age who was considered a super hot thing once upon a time, now just about to age out of the daytime exercise show that she's been fronting. She gets turned on to a very shady seeming, but you do what you do when you're desperate, mad science type deal, taking injections that promise to turn you younger for a limited amount of time. The way it actually works is, and again, I gave you the spoiler warning, kind of an osmosis mitosis sort of deal where you essentially split off a younger clone of yourself and you swap brains back and forth on like a weekly basis in a very gory, gooey sort of fashion. The rule being that you have to strictly enforce the weak as an old person, weak as a young person routine, or run the risk of the older body beginning to deteriorate if the younger body stays out too long. If you can imagine how you might fuck this up for yourself if you decide you like being the younger version too much and the two sides start to disagree about the use of things, congratulations, you have predicted where the plot of the movie goes, but not where the visualization of that plot might go. It's also different from the typical Jekyll and Hyde version of things because that story often turns on the idea of one alternate self not knowing what the other is doing. In this case, it really seems like she does know what she's doing in both cases, and yet chooses to effectively inflict self-harm on herself in both ways. The older body resenting the younger body resenting the older body. It's very much a film about arguing with both impulses, which makes it very relatable and tragic, but also very nasty and gnarly, and eventually just goes all the way. Like, if you've already pretty much figured out what the message is, what it's saying, the point it wants to make about what it is to be a woman aging in an industry that values youth and beauty over all else, congratulations, you've figured out the whole thing, but you haven't figured out what it's going to show you to make that point. And that's what is so much, for lack of a better word, fun about what is otherwise a very eventually unpleasant watch. There is a good stretch of this that is a very fun, gory movie and also a very sexy movie, and then it makes you pay for enjoying both things in a very gnarly way. This is great stuff in the grand old tradition of nasty body horror movies. Think The Fly, think Basket Case, a little bit of Society in there. If people remember, do people remember Society? I have tried actually to get to work out how to get the movie Society into either This Movie Exists or Schlocktober for a couple years now, and there's just no way to get that past standards and practices on YouTube as far as I can tell. Anything worth showing from that, they would never let me show. This one rules. Check this out. Go see it. Demi Moore should be nominated for Best Actress for this. If she's not, it's because the voters turned it off because it was too gross for them and they're fucking cowards. But otherwise she should, because this is brave, brave shit. Margaret Qualley as the younger version. This is what they call a star-making performance. But I bet that every agent that calls her in afterwards lies and said that they're calling her in about a different movie because they don't want to look her in the eye and say that they called her in because of this. You'll understand when you see it. Oh, and Dennis Quaid is also in this, playing basically the villain of the film as a producer of Demi Moore and then Margaret Qualley's show. And it's kind of fun that the only reason you can say that Dennis Quaid in this movie is not playing the most disgusting movie villain of the year and the most disgusting character Dennis Quaid has ever played is that he also played Ronald Reagan this year.